yourself, or you can never say how you really feel. Until now, yeah. When the sun down, my mind is on the rundown. I be feeling like my happiness is on the come down. But when I speak to you, I feel like it's a touchdown. Finally found me someone I can really trust now. I always have so much to say, but no one to say it to. If I can talk to you today, I know I can make it through. So let's have this conversation, like a radio station. So let's have this conversation, like a radio station.
It's finally Friday, and it's time for the conversation with Maria Byrd.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back. You are listening to The Conversation with Maria Byrd, and I'm super excited about today's show because we have with us a very special guest. He is a pastor, a speaker, a community activist, and author who co-leads Love Beyond Walls, a non-for-profit organization focused on raising poverty awareness and community mobilization. He holds an associate degree in media production from American Intercontinental University, a Bachelor of Arts in Pastoral Leadership from Atlanta Bible College, and Masters of Education and Counseling from Liberty University, and a Masters of Arts in Theological Studies from Liberty University. He also received numerous awards for his community activism, including the Empire Board of Realists Distinguished Service Award, Social Advocacy Award, Atlanta Voices 50 Under 50 Honor, the True to Atlanta Award presented by the Atlanta Hawks, and the Fulton County School Service Award, just to name a few. Please help me welcome to the show my very special guest, Terence Lester. Welcome to the show.
What's up? Grateful to be here.
Yes, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm alive. I'm grateful.
Awesome.
And just glad to be here.
Yes, and so before we get started, can you just tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so born and raised here in the city of Atlanta. You know, it's kind of hard to find a native these days, but I'm actually from here. I've been here my entire life, and married, going on 12 years. Shout out to my wife, Cecilia Lester. We'll make 12 years in August, and I have two beautiful kids. My daughter, her name is Zion, and my son's name is Terence II. And I normally tell people, it's two of us.
Yes, wow. And so can you just share with us regarding the nonprofit that you co-lead, Love Beyond Walls? Could you just tell us, how did you initially develop the concept for it?
Yeah, so I guess Love Beyond Walls was just birthed out of this idea that we need to take love into places where it doesn't exist. I remember the initial story. My wife and I, we were in our early 20s, college students, kind of like struggling. And I remember at the time we were engaged, and, instead of complaining about everything that we didn't have, we kind of had this conversation. We were like, well, what if we took, some of the items that we couldn't use anymore and just be a blessing to some people who don't have any items? And she was like, is there anywhere like this in the city? I mean, we're young. Like, I think she was like 21. I'm like 22, 23 or something. And so, yeah, we headed downtown to the heart of the city. We get downtown. I mean, I hop out the car. We saw this lady experiencing homelessness, and she was barefoot. And so, like, I flagged her down. I was like, hey, anybody need some clothes or shoes or something? And she ran over to the car, like, barefoot now. And my wife was right there with my fiance at the time. And so she says, yeah, I do. And so we popped the trunk. We started shuffling around the bags, just trying to find a pair of shoes. My wife had these old pair of black Reeboks, and she used to complain about these shoes, and she was just like, I'm gonna give them away or whatever. But she pulled the shoes out of the bag and handed them to the lady, and it was her exact size. Wow. And we'll never forget this lady, like, jumping up and down because she said, I was just praying for shoes last night. You know, and I think the whole idea of what it means to take the love of God and extend yourself beyond the walls, the four walls, the walls that exist in society and culture, whether it be all of the isms. You know, we believe that love is a powerful force and has the ability to burst through those walls. And so we wanted to take that to the most vulnerable of our city. And so we started leading groups and just engaging people living on the margins for about 10 years. There's way before social media, and I remember when we used to just like have to text people to come and get involved, to go and kind of like minister to people living on the streets or wrestling with extreme poverty. And so about 4.5 years ago, we formalized it into this organization. And I mean, I have a story about how that started, but
yes, come on. I mean, we got time.
Well, when we were thinking about like starting an organization, right? It was around the time like I had completed a lot of education. I experienced briefly some bouts of homelessness as a teenager myself, and so also like you know, I had this concept or this narrative about what it was, but back then I couldn't really fully articulate it. And now being on the other side and having education and all of that stuff, I felt like I was better able to advocate and be a voice to people who were without a voice in our city. And so I asked my wife, I had been building this relationship with this guy experiencing homelessness in the heart of the city, and his name was Kurt. I'll never forget hanging out with this guy for like 3 months straight. It took me three months before he actually told me his story, and I would just continue to show up. And he was expecting me not to show up, because oftentimes when people go out and serve, it's only like a one-time deal. But what we wanted to bring to the table was like these authentic relationships. What does it mean to really engage people and walk with them for however long it takes for them to transition out of homelessness or extreme poverty? And so, man, I'll never forget, I was standing behind this building. I mean, it's trash. He's living back there. I mean, you name it. It was just a horrible living condition. And so it had been about 3 months, and I asked him, because it's like November, and I'm like, bro, there's a shelter down the street. Why don't you let me just, help you get some help or whatever? And he says, man, it's about 400 or 500 guys down the street. They sleep in chairs. It's only one restroom. And he says the smell in there is so horrible. You could taste it. And he says it's so uncomfortable, and I would be in a situation where I would literally have to stay up all night because everything I own is in this bag, and I'm fearful that I'll lose everything that I own. My driver's license, my social security card, etc. And so he went on to tell me this story, and he says, I'm willing to bet you that if you went and lived in this shelter, you probably would be back out here on the backside of this building, because it's more comfortable around trash than it would be in the shelter. And that rocked me. Like it literally changed. It changed me, like that phrase. He then goes on to tell me like his story about how he downward spiral after his wife and child died in a car accident, how he couldn't cope because of the depression. He lost his job, and he had been living on the streets for the past 4 years. It gave me a greater sense of his humanity and his individual story, because most times people oftentimes generalize like homelessness or somebody wrestling with poverty. And what I like to tell people is that everybody has a unique story. Everybody's situation is different. People arrive to the issue from different vantage points. Some job loss, some domestic abuse, some death in the family. It's so many different stories connected to why people are experiencing the plight. And so I'll never forget leaving them. I went home, and I was reading this scripture around the time, Mark 10:45. It says, "For the Son of Man did not come to earth to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many." And it paints this wonderful picture of what it means to for God in Christ to take off his shoes, right? Literally take off his shoes and put on our shoes, to walk in our sufferings, to identify with us. And that was just like the gospel, like hitting me, right? And so I had this moment where I was like, what if I really followed Jesus and took off my shoes of comfort and put on the shoes of those that I was daring to serve? And so I go home, and this idea comes up, and I'm like, maybe I should make myself homeless and live as a homeless person in the heart of the city.
Wow.
And so we're sitting around the dinner table, and I'm going to ask my wife, or tell her at least, this is what's on my heart. And so it's me, my wife, and my 2 kids. We're sitting around the table. It's 2013. It was cold. It was like it was November, and I go, hey, I think I got an idea, or I think God is laying something on my heart. And she said, yeah, what is it? I say, I think he's leading me to live as a homeless person in the heart of this city, to advocate for people and to give people who are like on the outside an inside look of what it really means to be experiencing homelessness in this city. And she says, what?
Right.
Yeah, she says, what? And my wife is very supportive and has always like pushed me. So after we like got past that initial question, she was like, yeah, well, what if God is leading us to do this and make the sacrifice as a family? And so, long story short, I remember her dropping me off like days before Christmas, 2013. I mean, it's about to be like 23 degrees out. It's raining. There's a wind chill of about 19 degrees, and she's dropping me off under this bridge.
Wow.
To literally, as a demarcation to start the organization, Love Beyond Walls. And so, yeah, I did that campaign, then I did another one. In total, I've lived out among those who are experiencing homelessness and extreme poverty in the city of Atlanta for over a month. Eating out of trash cans, being put out of shelters, from having to beg for dollars for a meal. I remember one time, me and one of my homeless friends were standing out. We asked 427 people for $1. We only got 11.
Wow.
They didn't even know that we were asking for these dollars to raise funds for my friend who was experiencing homelessness because he had an illness, and we were trying to raise money for him to get his medication because he didn't have access to health care. And so, like, a lot of these realities of what the real plight and struggle of what people have to go through and fight through on a day-to-day basis became more real to me, and it increased my heart's desire to want to advocate on behalf of those who are marginalized and voiceless.
Now let me ask you this, because you talked about it, you touched on it a little bit earlier. Through your teenage years, you talked about how that you experienced just different times of homelessness. And so how did you overcome that?
Well, I mean, I normally tell this story. We have a center that's in College Park on East Main Street, and it's a few minutes away from the airport. A couple football fields away from Woodward Academy. I mean, it's the heart of downtown College Park, but it's also less than a mile away from Frank McLaren High School. Frank McLaren High School is back when I was in high school, it was an alternative school. This is where kids and students went when, they couldn't function in a public school setting, or, something happened where they were put out, or like they were facing some challenges or whatever. And I found myself there. Got in trouble a lot in high school, and so I kind of put myself on this path where I was not going to graduate. And so I ended up there and was dealing with a lot of social things stemming from my house as a teenager. And, to be honest, and this is just like parenthetically, we got to really understand what kids are going through, or teens are going through. That's outside of just seeing them in a public school setting, because many of the teachers that told me that I wouldn't be anything, or they saw me being dead or locked up or in jail, had no clue of what I was carrying outside of the public school setting. It was just being fleshed out in my behavior, and so they misunderstood that. So I found myself there, alternative school, and I remember the day or days I was telling my mom I was like, forget school, like I'm not gonna.
Right, I've said that before.
I'm not gonna finish. And I remember walking away from this alternative school. Now this is the school that's less than a mile away from where our organization's office is now.
Wow, come
but
on.
like I was walking away. I'm like 16 and a half, and I encountered this homeless guy outside of the school. I was walking with my peers. We were in this group, and he stops our group. And my friends thought he was just going to ask for some change, but for some reason he signaled to me to come over, and like I walked over or whatever. We started this conversation. And he says, you go to that school over there? I was like, yeah. He was like, you need to complete and finish high school or whatever. And he just goes into this long conversation about how if I didn't get it together, I was going to end up like him. He was in his mid-50s. He was like, one day you're going to be a leader. He was just telling me all these things. Didn't even ask me for any money.
Wow.
I'll never forget that conversation because that became one of the most pivotal conversations in planting a seed in me to really thinking and reflecting about how valuable education was to me. And so I went back to high school as a fifth-year senior, opted not to do a GED. Not saying anything bad about those who decided to go that path, but I finished, and that was the type of love being displayed or poured out, I believe, from God through various people, not just those that incidents, but many teachers who would call out my potential. My mom displaying and showing tough love when needed, mentors coming into my life, and it just helped me to stay on a path where I gleaned a little here, a little there, a little here, a little there, and over time God kind of used all of those persons that he was working through in my life to lead me to where I am today. And so to answer your question, what helped me? One, it was my ability to listen. And, sometimes it's just so hard for us to listen, especially I was a teen then. There were several things that were distracting to me, but I think there was always this like foundation in myself, because I had my mom and my grandmother like telling me you can't keep doing this, you can't keep on this path or whatever. So whenever anybody ever spoke some truth, I always felt like it was a time to listen, even when it seemed like I wasn't listening. I was listening, and I had to listen. But then too, I had to be open to make some of the changes, and some of those changes were hard for me. But I think I was talking to a friend the other day, and I was kind of like describing this. It's like, you know, if you look at a picture frame, like we can go to Walmart, we could buy little picture frames or whatever. You could buy a little one, right? And so the only image that will fit in the small frame is what the frame is designed for. And at that time, I had a very small image of myself.
Wow.
Because I had never seen anything bigger than what, like, this little frame of mine that I had about my life. And so people coming into my life and me being open exposed me to a bigger picture of what I could become. And here's the thing, like, once you get a bigger picture of yourself, you can no longer fit into the frame of mind that you once had. And so that was the thing for me, you know. I got a bigger picture of what I could become and do with my life from being open. And then thirdly, I guess I felt like I saw my mom. She displayed this resilience. And I think I gained a lot of that from her. This ability to commit and make that commitment, and you know, not allow it to, you know, just not allow it to fall to the floor, right? And so I had to commit myself, and I it was a struggle, but you know, without struggle, there's no progress. And I just had this deep desire to break some of the statistical cloud that was hovering over me as a young African American. Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask you, you know, like, what are, you know, as far as poverty and social, economical injustices, how are those two connected?
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious people are impoverished because of a lack of access. I define poverty as not having access to better education, healthcare, economics, job opportunities. I mean, you name it. Poverty is a lack of access. And so with this lack of access, let's just take education, for instance. I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and I was talking about some of the books that I've been reading. I started collecting these books in my early 20s, and so it just dawned on us that even reading a book is a privilege, right?
That's right.
Because if you're impoverished and nobody's in your context has the information, then it's hard for you to obtain the information and then even find yourself in a position to be able to apply it. Why? Because you're in survival mode, literally.
Right.
You're thinking about, you know, how you're going to pay your bills or where's the next meal coming from. Like, we had a lady walk 5 miles to our office with her kid the other day, and her daughter, her baby, is a baby in a stroller, was literally eating spaghetti sauce as baby food. How can you even think about reading a book? So this is what I'm saying. Like, it's a lack of access, and so poverty puts you at a great disadvantage to reaching your God-given potential.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And so I wanted to ask you, you know, for an individual that may find themselves in that situation, what are some practical steps that they can take, you know, in order to begin to come out of that situation?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I would definitely firstly, I would get a picture of what it is that you want, right? Is it a better job? Is it relocation based upon your geography? Some people that we walk with just need, like, relational capital, you know, if you were to ask most people experiencing extreme poverty or experiencing homelessness, they would say one of the most detrimental things about the entire experience is that they don't have the social capital. They don't have any solid relationships. You know, you ask people like, "Where's your family?"
Right.
Or who's helping you just to like walk through this. Sometimes it's just figuring out where is it a community that if I was to involve myself or get around that would support me socially, but also that social support also provides emotional support, right? Because you find strength in the community that you surround yourself with. And then I would I think another thing too is really seeking out wisdom through those relationships.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah, for instance, like, you don't know what you don't know, and so I think sometimes just putting ourselves in spaces where we can allow the community to pour into us, to stretch us, to provide wisdom for us, puts us at a greater advantage. Because also with those relationships, and you'll hear me talk about relationships a lot. A lot of the quality relationships that you can amass, whatever is in their hands can also be in your hands. You know, the lessons, the life lessons, the experiences you can glean from relationships that they have. You know, that's one of the things we focus on within the context of our organization is, you know, building this love army of people who want to lend themselves relationally to those who may be at a disadvantage. I remember this. We had this this one guy we had provided shelter for, and so he was lost and had been out of touch with his family for 30 years, right? And so we had a volunteer. We call them doers. This one lady, she had a knack for research, and I remember her coming up, building a relationship with this individual, and just like literally getting to know him, spending time with him, getting to understand his story, and her using or leveraging her gift for research to help him connect to his family after being lost for 30 years.
Wow.
You know, that's the power of relationships, but it's also the power of what happens when people are like totally surrendered to God and give of their gifts and talents and abilities to empower those who are at a disadvantage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow, I love that. And so you kind of touched on it a little bit, and you know, we know that you are a pastor. And so can you just talk about as far as like the ministry and how that has played a part, you know, regarding love beyond walls?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, so I mean, I'm a believer, I'm a follower of Christ, and so in everything that I do, I try to do that. So my family, we view our lifestyle as a ministry. So like for me, everywhere would be considered an opportunity to live like Jesus.
Absolutely.
You know, we allow our lifestyle to be the message, and I think that's the greatest way to connect to those who are experiencing homelessness and poverty, because like you can't fake Christianity.
You can't.
Among people who are in desperation,
right? Absolutely.
You know, you could put on a mask and makeup or a nice suit in some spaces, but you can't fake it. And sometimes you meet people who are, and we got to get away from this too. Just because somebody is experiencing poverty does not mean that they don't have faith.
Wow.
Because there have been many times when good folks who consider themselves Christians would come down and be among people who may be experiencing